Well, I started revisiting my old diaries and memoirs from field marshals of World War II and their armored actions in Europe. And I just got finished with Panzer Killers with Maurice Rose, a U.S. general and an armored commander. And I'm reading the Rommel papers now, his diaries. They're great. Then I'm going to read Patton's Third Army. Well, it started getting me excited again about my MBT game we've been playing. So I have set up another one, and this is a solitaire, as best we can do it. And what it represents is, of course, the way NATO thought was that the Russians would attack out of Czechoslovakia. They would stage in Czechoslovakia and attack through the Fulda Gap and Hof Corridor area and head to Frankfurt and be there in a week. So our scenarios that we've been playing have been representing that. And if you watched them, pretty much it covers here. You'll see the U.S. 7th Corps area. If you watched them, the Soviets have been stalled. They pretty much lost the initiative. They got across the Mainz River at Kolmolk, and that's where some meeting engagements took place. Pretty good battles. Really enjoyed it with the kids. And so to follow the narrative, the next scenario here, I'm short on players, so I devised a solitaire one. And the narrative is that the Americans are getting ready for a counter strike, and they're going to hit the weak sections that where the Soviet Guards tank division and a rifle motorized division, they meet up. That sector's a little meet where the two divisions come together, and before they actually initiate the offensive, they want to strike deep into Russian territory behind the lines and capture this vital crossroads area. And the game turns are going to be 10. That's the shortest amount of game turns in all my scenarios because it has to be done quick. And so when the offensive starts and breaks through the front line, we want to have the crossroads here under control so we can move on through. So the Soviets got to set up first because, again, it's solitaire, and I put them on the board. We have 18 infantry platoons, and they're all crack. And we set up knowing that this side of the board is the west, it's the front. So keeping that in mind, but I am protecting the crossroads and then outer building areas pretty heavily. Now, aside from the Soviets having 4 ZU-23 AA guns, every third squad is equipped with an SA-14, AA missile launcher, and they're very effective. So it's great against air units. It'll be perfect coming against the Air Cav, and the Soviets also have plenty of artillery. And for the Americans' part, I am excited to play this because I've never done this scenario yet, and it's got 2 aero infantry platoons. That's 8 Black Hawk helicopters, 4 in each platoon, carrying special forces light squads. And there's an aero scout section, and then there's 4 weapons sections. That's 2 Apaches each. That's 8 attack helicopters. And then as far as the defense goes, well, the Soviets are in prepared defenses, and it's offset by the Americans getting 4 jamming points. The Soviets do get 1, but American communications are better, especially at that time, and so they get more radio jamming. And then the Americans do have 1 F-16. Now, we do this based on a point system when you do your own scenarios. It's a defensive engagement. The Soviets, if we do dense terrain, they have 80% of what the Americans have. Well, they have 1,000 points over that, so it's quite a bit. So I gave the Americans an F-16, which brought that gap down a little bit, but the Soviets still have more than they should. But we'll see how it goes. Now, as far as the American setup, it's going to be done randomly. We have no idea where they're coming in. This is the front line, so they could enter from there. And then I picked this road right here, and they could come in from this side of the board, south of this road right here. And then the same on the other side. They can enter from that side also. Now, since this operation is going to commence at 3 a.m. and they're trying to be very sneaky about it and get a surprise. This is the only sections they can come in from. To come from the back side, that would be too noticeable. So that's why I picked this section. Now, when I set up the Russians, I didn't know where they would be entering from. It's going to be done by a die roll right here. We got a 6, so the side closest to me was a 1-2. The front direction would be a 3-4, and then the opposite side over there was going to be a 5 and 6. So they're entering from that side of the board, and you can see I put all the American units right there. Now, as the Americans are flying up to the edge of the board, they can actually start seeing shooting, and same for the Russians. So we will start shooting before they actually enter the board, but these are the areas that they're entering the board at. Now, another thing I want to show you are these cards I made, because we're keeping track of all the ammunition for the artillery, for the helicopters' rockets, and all the helicopters' guns. And the Soviets' AA guns and their anti-tank guns also, if they become separated from their trucks, or their trucks are destroyed or whatever, then they will also have to keep track of their ammunition. As long as their trucks stay with them, however, they will have unlimited. But even the ammo can run out here. So all this IA will keep track of. And then to keep this as random as possible, because it's solitaire, I'm using these markers here. And what these do is they represent each unit that's on the board, and they will go in a cup. There's the cup. And you draw them so you don't know what turn your pieces are going. And then I'll explain a little more how the Americans will get a couple extras, and how you can use some units right away when you're within range of a headquarters. Because one thing, when you read about all these commanders and in their diaries, they always go to the front. They always take over a regiment or even a division and lead it themselves. So we have to take into account commanders coming in here and directing a certain area that's pivotal, and therefore I'll show you how that works. But with that being said, it still will allow the randomness where I don't know who's going, at what specific time. But also, in the beginning of the game, the helicopters don't use markers. They're allowed to move twice in a phase, so they're just going to move twice in the phase without any hindrances until they unload their infantry and cargo. And then lastly, for the point totals for the objectives, there's got to be like 2,900 objective points on the board. So the crossroads area with the 5 buildings that are around that, they're going to be worth like probably 300 points each. The bridges around there, probably another 200 points each, maybe 3. And then the buildings that are more further out will be a little less, worth a little less points. So that'll be the objectives, and we'll get into detail that when I start the game. I got to still compute it and figure it out, but we'll be ready to go.